I'm loving the poster collection, and also the kind of like wide shut bathroom light behind you is really.
Nice. No detail is, left unnoticed. So I'm glad you spotted that. Thank
Oh,
you.
We'll see you in court.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Oh, hi, Mark.
It's delicious. Oh my
I mean, where to begin? This is one of the wildest projects I've ever been a part of. And the big reason for that is that, like, my meeting JT is a completely random event. It's like one of the few moments in my life where, like, if I just said no to doing something that I would normally say no to, this never would have happened and we never would have met. And there's no kind of other way in my mind that our paths would have crossed. And that I find is really rare in my life. Like most things that happen, I can kind of see how I would get there eventually, but this is a freaky one. So I think that's, yeah, this sort of cosmic kismet has colored every sort of like frame of this experience for me, which makes it pretty special.
Are you someone that believes in that you were kind of brought to this moment, or are you just like,
No,
God, that was
I,
lucky?
I believe in nothing.
Okay, okay.
So that's what, trying to kind of, I'm like deeply not a woo-woo person. So yeah, trying to kind of understand what it all means when I know that it means nothing, but it's very dope.
Presumably, this is completely the project for the film. So, as in, you wrote the music for the film, or were these kind of ideas that you had before, and you thought, "Oh, this is a great time to start working on some stuff"? How was the kind of creative process?
A little bit of a combo pack. So again, short story long, like JT and I met at the end of 2019. So pre-world ending, pre-apocalypse. It was a nice time. um, and we met on a hike and we had a 7-minute conversation about music and film and single artist soundtracks and Harold and Maude, and we sort of kept in touch, and I watched his first film and he listened to my record. And then we didn't really speak until 2 years later. He emailed me and said, I wrote us a movie. I hope this isn't weird, but would you like to read the script? And he had written in a few of my older songs into it from my last record, Get Z to a Nunnery. And I read it, and called him 2 hours later, just like hyperventilating because I loved it so much. And yeah, then it just sort of became like the intention was only for me to write like a couple new original songs for this movie. But while they were shooting, I didn't see anything. I just had the script and I was kind of talking to JT every day. And, here's what scene we're shooting and here's what song, like, here's the Sybil Bayer song that I originally like thought I would love to license for this. And I just said like, okay, just give me 19 hours and let me see what I can do. And so some of these songs, like the oldest song that I have in this film is Day In, Day Out, which I originally wrote for the like right before we broke up. So that's, about 450,000 years ago. And that song stylistically is very different now, but structurally is pretty unchanged. And that was the first thing I sent him because I read the script and then I knew what scene it was. And I was just like, I have a song that I kind of can't fucking believe I didn't write for this. And so there were a few of those that it felt kind of like they suddenly made sense within the context of the film. And then the rest of it was just, reading a scene in the morning, writing during the day, recording at night, mixing until 5 a.m. and sending it off.
And how long was the whole process from getting the script to coming up with the ideas to the kind of finished product being ready?
In the scheme of, how film usually works, like pretty fucking short. I read the script and 2 weeks later, we had producers, and a month later, Miramax bought it in the room, and like I don't know, a month or two later, like they were shooting. And the shoot was, I think, under a month. So I was writing and recording almost all of these like during that time. So it, the bulk of the work was probably like 3 weeks for me, music wise. And then, there were a few more songs that I wrote and tried to, it ended up being 11 songs, which is insane. I just kept being like, what if,
the subject matter, well, not the subject matter so much, but rather the style of the film is very intense and quite stressful and unexpected. The music, for the most part, is very gentle, emotional, beautiful. When you read the script for the first time, did you think where is this kind of connect with the music style and then the kind of intensity of the film, or was that always going to be a deliberate decision to kind of have those differences?
It's so funny because I didn't really think about it in those terms. JT and I kind of had an initial conversation where he said, like, I'm thinking Julie Cruz meets Leonard Cohen meets you. And I was just like, I know how to do that. That's kind of the only thing I know how to do, in fact.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think the thing that sort of ended up being, and I don't even know that we sort of set out to make it this way, but for better or for worse, like, I felt like I could be inside the head of the lady so easily and so intensely that it was it was easy for me to write sort of for her. And it kind of ended up that the score really is like the music of the demon and my music really is the music of the lady. And that kind of very weird push-pull of this kind of like ethereal, whispery shit and like the intensity of Craig's amazing score just creates this kind of insane, dissonant dread. It's like some of it was sort of intentional and some of it was just, I don't know. I like perhaps empathize way too much with the characters, and it was just kind of easy for me. It's like these songs just like fucking poured out, which was very fun.
That's good. That's a good position to be in. I can imagine you felt pretty pleased that you weren't like, oh my God, where I'm going to get another 7 songs from.
Writing was easy, and also just JT and I just fucking agreed on everything. And like it's very, very rare that I've had a creative partnership with anyone, let alone in a situation like this, where like everything I sent him, he was just like, that's exactly what I wanted. It's exactly what I heard in my head. And, I'm generally kind of a does not play well with others sort of person. So it was a surreal experience to be that sort of creatively connected as to sort of almost be able to sort of read each other's minds.
Is this your first film as a composer?
It's a weird, I've written for films before, and before working on this movie, I was working on like Daisy Jones and the Six for a few years. So I wrote a bunch of those songs and sort of sang all over that record. So I existed in that world for a while. I enjoy like writing with an assignment. I find it very much easier to have like that kind of structure. I think like my ADHD requires a bit of a prison because otherwise it's everywhere. But yeah, this is definitely the first time that I've written an entire soundtrack, because that's also, part of why this happened is because we had that conversation of like, why does no one do this? Anytime you think of like a single artist soundtrack like this, it's iconic and people love it. And it's such a remarkable world building tool. And why is it that every director is like, what if I did not do that?
Yeah, I was trying to think beforehand, and the only one I can think of recently is Suspiria, the remake that Tom York did the music for. And that has a real like horror and like real kind of gentle beauty to it as well. And it kind of reminded me of that in a little way. And it does completely kind of change your experience of the film, I think, because you kind of is like another character in the film, and you get used to, another song coming in and you're like, oh, I really like the last one. I'm glad there's another one. And you're like, it kind of takes you on that journey with the characters as well.
I'm such a big fan of like really comprehensive world building, just in general in art. Like that shit really works for me.
Yeah.
And for us to go so far as like there's one song in this movie that I don't sing, and it's sort of in the background of a scene on the radio, and it is JT's mother singing one of my songs.
Wow. Okay.
And just how far that sort of the world building goes, that like, you know, the tenets of the reality of Strange Darling is that all music is written by me. And like, there's something so wonderful about that. And I think it's, you know, it's a little bit of like feeling a sense of control in a deeply chaotic world of just like, God, what if we could build our own world from the ground up? It's a nice feeling.
Has that set your expectations quite high now for your next project? You can be like, I mean, I could write you one song, or I could write, you know, 11. Maybe think about that.
I know. We'll see if anyone else if anyone else is interested in this, but I don't know. I think I also feel like there's the soundtrack is really kind of having an interesting resurgence of, because in the music business, like, you know, for many years, people have just kind of outright said, like, soundtracks don't matter. People don't buy them. You can just download the music, make the playlist yourself. And people have kind of forgotten about like the magic of like original music for film and how like important that has been. And if you see, you know, there's a lot of kind of focus on that all of a sudden. It's just like the Twister soundtrack was like all original music for that film. The Trap soundtrack, the Smile 2 soundtrack, like there's so much of a value being all of a sudden remembered and placed on music and film that I feel like is very positive.
That's good. It's good that is the, you know, coming back and having a positive effect on the movie going experience, and also that, you know, showing filmmakers that it can be done and be done really well as well. Were you surprised with the reaction? Were you pleased with your reaction? Was it what you expected in terms of the film success? And also, I imagine, or I hope, you've been getting lots of nice comments about the soundtrack. How has that been for you?
Pretty amazing. Yeah, I feel like I've never maybe been a part of something that has had this positive a response. I feel like the general response to most of my work is like disappointment. So,
well, I'm glad this is good. I'm glad to hear.
Granted, that may be partly in my own head, but it's kind of been an amazing thing to see. Because also, I think both JT and I expected this movie to be incredibly polarizing, because demanding it is, you know, it's like an incredibly sort of modernist work that like demands a lot of participation from its viewer and a lot of attention and a lot of, you know, it has very little exposition and it demands you sort of come to your own conclusions, and mostly that you examine the way it makes you feel. And I don't know, I think more than anything, I've been like incredibly impressed with how much people have been engaging with it, like on an intellectual level. And yeah, it kind of like gives me hope for humanity a little bit.
That's good. It's good to know. When you saw the film for the first time as well, like, what was your reaction to having your music in this incredible film, and also how it kind of worked within the film? Were there any surprises for you, or was it exactly how you pictured it to be?
I think mostly it was kind of exactly how I imagined. And the big reason for that is that JT wrote, you know, this script is the sort of the most like realized script I've ever read in my life. Like, you know, the lenses were written in, the songs were written in, the costumes were written in. Like he just kind of constructed this from top to bottom. But I was not prepared. I was not prepared for the performances, and particularly because I had not actually seen Willa or Kyle in anything before this.
Yeah.
And watching this for the first time and being like, are you fucking kidding me? Such remarkable performances. And also, yeah, it's Ed Begley Jr. and Barbara Hershey are so kind of strangely a little bit feel like the like emotional center of this movie. Like I find, well, first of all, and this may be telling about me, but I'm just like dream life. That is my dream relationship, my dream life. Like maybe a little less
to a point. You want to cut it off at a certain point, but yeah.
But yeah, the thing I really wasn't prepared for was that I've seen this movie like 150 times at this point. Like I was there in editing for days and days and days and days, and I've been to a million screenings. I wasn't prepared for the fact that I cry every time I watch it, yeah, it's very difficult to sort of straddle all of the lines that this movie does, and to be as emotional to me as it is, and also as jarring and disturbing and fucked up and funny. Yeah, it contains multitudes.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of conflicting emotion. It's definitely not a popcorn movie. I would say it's like the opposite of a popcorn movie, because I was scared to like breathe, cough, had to hold in, not going to the loo for the full thing, because there's just so many little moments, like the music, the tension, the relationships between the characters. Are these the kind of stories that you're drawn to generally? Like, is this the kind of film that you would see if you weren't involved in any way, or what's your kind of what are you interested in?
The other thing about this is, like, when I first read the script, I was just like, this is the movie that I would write if I wrote movies. There's nothing in this world that checks all of my boxes of like what I'm into. And, sort of from its structure to its themes to its just, if you've seen any of my music videos, somebody is always dead, or everybody. I think I sort of, exist sort of thematically at all times in the sort of tenuous dance between life and death. So it's really a movie for me.
And were there any inspirations, or are there any inspirations for you as an artist, that musicians you grew up watching, or films you grew up watching, arts that you appreciated? Is there any kind of life references in your work?
The answer to that question is like 17 hours long. I mean, I think, my sort of structural foundation, music-wise, always starts with the Beatles and Bob Dylan. And that is always kind of the starting place for me. I mean, I think, like, as a kid, I don't think I knew there was music that was not the Beatles until I was 10 years old. So that sort of exists as a big, like, foundational, like, part of my work at all times. And then I think sort of discovering the world of, like, Nico and Dusty Springfield and Dory Previn and Linda Perhacs, and, like, I sort of entered into the world of sort of the finger picking sort of acoustic life that I sort of live now. And then there's always just sort of like the tension of sort of the noise and static of like My Bloody Valentine, Jesus and Mary Chain, Sundays. And my number one favorite record of all time is Scott 4 by Scott Walker. So that, I think that at all times is like the bar that I'm holding whatever I'm working against. That probably, yeah. Which is really why it's good that I'm writing music for film right now, because that is not what the kids are into. But yeah, there's something about his lyricism and the drama of it all, while also sort of feeling incredibly contained. I love it. I love it a lot.
As someone who creates music, are you much more hyper aware to music in films now? Like, if you see a film and you spot a really clever music choice or a needle drop or like some really cool choice, do you notice those things?
I don't think I notice them anymore. I think it's always, it's a blessing and a curse, because, man, like, when music is amazing, it's, I think it like elevates any sort of piece of film into a different stratosphere. But if I'm watching something and I hate the score, I don't know how to finish it.
Right.
Yeah, it's like one of those things that I can't block out. But yeah, it's a magical relationship, those things. And also, something like the Phantom Thread score, I think, is, to me, like one of, top 5 of all time. And it's interesting to have that. Like, I listen to that as a record constantly. And it's amazing to see something. And two, because that's not, this is kind of a different project, whereas I wrote original music that sort of makes sense as a record. But to have a score like that just feels like, it's one of my favorite records of all time. Fucking Challenger's score.
Mm-hmm.
I love music. I love music in movies. I think it's great.
That's my 5-second intro. We'll use that, and then titles.
Deep thoughts from Z BERG.
Was there a moment or a song or a person that kind of inspired you to be this person that you are now, creatively? Was there is there like a moment you can think of where you go, that's when I realized I could actually make music, or I wanted to do this?
I started playing music so young. Yeah, I started playing piano when I was 5, and I started writing songs when I was 13. Um, Fiona Apple was very big, both musically and as like my bi awakening. It was a very big moment when I was 9, where I was just like, okay, so that's what I want to be. I want to do that. In real life, there was a sort of a big shift in like my writing, because I started the Like when I was 15, and I just sort of existed in writing for a band, and I always wanted to be in a band, and that's sort of all I knew. And when I was 20, I sang on Casadega, the Bright Eyes record, and sort of started hanging out with all of those people. And through Connor and Jason Bozell, who was my drummer in a couple other bands, and from Rather Proudly and Bright Eyes, I met Gillian Welch and Dave Rawlings. And at that time in my life, which like I miss so drastically now, the sort of parties that we had were just kind of sitting around in a circle and everyone playing songs. And it was the first time in my life where I realized, oh, I write for a band. I can't just sit and play a song in this sort of totally contained way. And that was sort of the moment when I started writing this kind of music and writing things that are just, it's part of why finger picking is like so magical, is because you can kind of play the whole band with your little creepy spider fingers. And so that was definitely a big kind of change in my world. And I played in bands for a long time after that, but this sort of world that I live in now and the music that I write really kind of changed around then.
And has this experience made you want to do more of it? Has it changed your expectations of what you want to do creatively? Where do your kind of passions lie now in terms of music?
I would really like to continue doing this. I think that JT and I will continue to do more in the future. And because, what a remarkable creative partnership. I could not ask for anything more in my life. But yeah, I really enjoy sort of working within the world of fiction. I have found it very hard in these times to just write, because honestly, like, things are so bleak in general for humanity that, like, I don't know, the only thing I come up with when I try to write is just like abject despair. And I don't really know how to put that into words. It's rough. So it's been nice to have, the sort of the tenets of a fictional world as my structure within to write, because I think that it's allowed me to sort of get to the truth of, what I want to write about, but without just sort of the vast and deep despair holding me back from being able to write anything at all.
It's and that's the end. That's the outro. Sorted. There are two wolves. I love music and the deep, drastic despair of being. It's really fascinating because I don't come from a musical world. I come from an acting and writing and film kind of world. So to learn about the music process and how that kind of integrates with the film is really interesting. Are there any films that you particularly love, or any films that you go back to, or any that are like kind of defining moments in your film watching life?
My favorite movie of all time is a movie called Ball of Fire.
Okay, I don't know.
1939, I think. It's Barbara Stanwyck and Gary Cooper, and it is the greatest movie of all time, in my humble opinion. It's kind of a retelling of Snow White, and it's about these 10 or 11 sort of old crotchety men who are writing an encyclopedia, and they realize when they're getting to the end of it that they have no writing about modern slang, and so they send the hot young Gary Cooper out into the world to find out about slang, and he meets Barbara Stanwyck, who's a fast-talking kind of showgirl, and all sorts of hijinks ensue. But it's so much a movie about language. And, that is a real kink for me. I'm a big fan of sort of like fast talking 30s and 40s comedies. So like Philadelphia Story, I think, is kind of like the greatest movie of all time. But recently, I watched Death in Venice, the Visconti again recently.
Mm-hmm.
I was so taken aback by just like how extraordinarily beautiful it is. Just kind of, I don't know, like how do you make things look like that now?
Yeah.
It's so crazy. I also watched Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice like a couple months ago.
Not seen that.
And, oh my God, it's so good and so fun and kind of like 70s. It runs the gamut with me.
Well, I'm going to go watch all of those because I need to see all of those. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I'm glad we got the time to sit down and chat about it. And yeah, I absolutely loved the film, and your music takes it to a whole new level, and it's beautiful. So thank you so much for giving us that soundtrack and for taking the time to talk to me. And yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.